Hi everyone, I'm Dwayne and welcome to the channel. Today I'm really excited because we're going to try and get a knocked loose tone, as you can hear in the song Suffocate. And to be honest, this is a tone that it's the new knocked loose tone, which Isaac Hale has described as the hell tone. And basically it's this tone where it just sounds like everything is falling apart, super compressed, completely messed up, but really cool at the same time. Like really unique considering, heavy music is largely generic and a little bit stagnant. I feel like Knocked Loose are really, they're pushing the boundary in terms of what they're doing with distortion and stuff like that. Now, one thing worth pointing out before we do this is their studio sound, I've read, is actually a result of layering like 10 to 12 tracks in a song. So that's 10 to 12 guitar tracks. Obviously, that's going to create a wall of sound, and we can't do that on the quad Cortex, but we can still try and get that chainsaw-like distortion tone. Now, obviously, I've done some research into this tone, and there are a few things at play here. There's a pitchfork, which is like an octave pedal, basically. They drop it down an octave to kind of get that lower sort of octave under the thing, and then they kind of split the mix, so it's mixing in with the main signal as well, so you kind of get this pitch down effect. They've got the way huge Swollen Pickle, and they also use the Boss HM2, I believe, as well, which kind of gives you that it's characteristic chainsaw distortion. Now, we don't have a pitchfork, we don't have a Swollen Pickle, and we don't have a Boss HM2 on the quad Cortex. They are available on the cloud, but as you know, I like to do things a little bit more difficult, I guess you could say. I like to use the models that come on the quad Cortex and try and get creative with EQs and existing effects and whatnot. So I'm in Cortex control now, and the one thing that I'm going to do before anything else is I'm going to add a noise gate, because this is a very noisy tone, and I feel like we we definitely want to try and filter out as much noise as possible. So I'm actually going to use I'm going to use the plugin gate for this. And I'll set the threshold to negative 40 dB. We want quite a high threshold on there. Now, before I start adding in EQs and all that kind of stuff, we're going to add in an amp. So I'm pretty certain Isaac Hale uses, like, he described it as like a Bogner. It's a Bogner Uberschall, but it's some different variant that's different to the quad Cortex, where it has like an extra added gain stage. So super gained. Now, I'm going to use the EVH5153 because I know they were using those previously, and we can kind of get that similar tone. And then I'm going to add in the Zilla Cast V30, which is my favorite cabinet, for the 5153, and without any adjustments or EQ or anything like that, this is what we have. I love the EVH5150 because it just sounds so good out of the box without anything done to it. But of course, we're going to do some modifications and stuff in there. One of those being we're going to give it some more gain. I don't like to push the EVH5153 too high in gain. I like to keep it controlled because you can use boosting pedals and stuff. And we are going to add some pedals to this, trust me. I'm going to knock down the bass as well. I am going to increase the mid just a little bit. I'm going to set the treble quite high for that clarity to 7. Presence, I'm thinking it's going to be quite high. I'm going to put that at 7. We may need to go to 8. I'm going to drop the resonance down to 4, and I'm going to set the master to 5. And this is what we have. It'll largely sound the same. I can hear it's a bit flubby. It's needing some EQ, which traditionally you'd get with the tube screamer. But we're actually going to try and replicate this chainsaw tone now. Now, It might be a little bit trial and effort to get this chainsaw tone because we don't have a lot of the pedals they're using. I was actually thinking, could you just use a tube screamer and dime it up, basically? That might get you some level of distortion, but this level of distortion is characterized as being a chainsaw. It's like distorted. It's really rough. And if you heard the original, you've heard the original Suffocate song or any of the newer tracks, it's really aggressive distortion. So I'm actually going to try something of using the Boss Metal Zone, which is probably the closest to the HM2, not the same, but yeah, it's kind of what we have. I'm going to set the distortion quite high. Maybe I'll go a little bit higher, but this is kind of not going to sound anything like what we want yet, but you can hear where we're going with this. You can hear it's definitely, it's kind of sounding messed up. So we're going to continue. We're going to put the low up to 7. We want a lot of that, more of that characteristic mid-range that kind of I would associate with the chainsaw tone. I'm going to dial this up to 9, maybe even 10. For the mid-range frequency, I'm going to put that around about 7. So that's going to get us around the 1K mark, I would say. Might even need to go a little bit higher. It's going to be in the vicinity. The 1K mark is the sweet spot that we're looking for here. I'm going to set the high to 6. And the level, we kind of don't want to push that too high. We want to keep that around about 5 or 6. This is going to sound pretty messed up. You can hear it's breaking up. It sounds disgusting. And I'm pretty happy with it so far. So now we're going to shape the frequencies a little bit. I might use a tube screamer to do this. We kind of want something that's going to shape, but we also want a little bit more control. Something that kind of equates to more of a swollen pickle. For that, you'd probably get pretty close with a rodent drive. I'd say that's probably... I'm getting some weird sounds on here through my headphones. I'm going to dial that distortion down because we don't want anything too crazy. We're going to set that filter quite low because we don't want to start cutting out the mid-range, and we're going to set the volume to about 7 on that. Let's just hear what we got now. I can hear we're getting there. We are getting in that vicinity. But I think what we need to do here, just listening to this, there's some frequencies in there that we need to EQ going into the amp, but after the pedals, if that makes sense. I can hear that these pedals are only getting us part of the way there. So I'm going to do a parametric 3 EQ because I'm not going to do too many. I'm getting some weird noises through the headphones. So for the first one, we're going to do maybe around the 100. I'm going to do Q size of 1. We don't want to go too crazy. And we're going to actually cut that by around about 2. And we're going to hear how that sounds. Still a bit rough, but we're getting there, I think. Between around about the 1K range, actually, we want to boost this quite a bit to kind of get that chainsaw-y tone. And I'm going to set the Q size like 2 for that. We want it a little bit more like sweeping. Let's hear how this sounds. I may even bump that dB up to like 8. God, that's sounding messed up. We may even drop the Boss Metal Zone out, and we may actually even put a tube screamer in its place if we're not happy with how this sounds. But we're just going to experiment around and see. A lot of this is EQ. A lot of those pedals are EQ at the end of the day. So that's kind of what we're doing. We're trying to replicate a pedal here. Now for this, we're going to set the Q size at 1. And for this frequency, we're going to boost around about the 3,500, maybe 4K mark. And we're going to boost that by about 3. and we're going to hear how that sounds. I can actually hear that the EQ actually is doing a wonderful job in place of the metal zone, which makes me wonder if we put a tube screamer in there and we put that down, what level are we setting that at? 6. Here it sounds without the rodent drive, because we might be able to get the distortion from a tube screamer. It's going to put this up quite high to like 8 or 9. That sounds pretty... It sounds pretty messed up. I don't know if it's quite there yet. We still have to kind of contend with the... I'm going to drop out the rodent drive. I'm going to add this in. Maybe we could use the rodent drive in there, but disable the metal zone for a second. The metal zone is really damn noisy, isn't it? Yeah, I don't know about the rodent drive, to be honest with you. Let's push up the tube screamer and see how that goes. Boost straight into the amp. Okay, let's leave that for a second. Let's now do the pitchfork sort of mimicking and set that to 40%. And we're going to drop that down by 12 semitones, which is an octave. So I was reading that he says sometimes he has all of them on to create the hell tone, then he'll turn 1 off or 2 off, and kind of switches around. So let's hear how this sounds. Yeah, I think I'm going to go back to the EQ for a second, because I think there I was actually doing 1K before, but I think what I needed to do was go up to about 1100, and I'm going to boost that even higher. We did 5 before, but I'm going to go 8. Okay, we needed to cut more from the lower cut there. God, that's so messed up. Yeah, I think that it kind of depends on your pickups and stuff as well. That's kind of sounds to me like the sweet spot. Now for 3, we're doing a 3 decibel gain. I think we need to increase the cue size quite a bit on that. And I may even go up a little bit higher. I feel like it's not quite hitting where we want. And I'm going to bump that up to 5. You can see that's clipping big time, but I mean, this isn't a pretty sound. You're not using this to play chords. You're using this to watch the world end, basically. I don't know if I like the metal zone in this tone. I think it's a little bit too aggressive. I'm inclined to keep the tube screamer and probably maybe experiment around with that rodent drive again. But set the distortion low, obviously, set the filter low, and then set the volume to about 7. Definitely feels like there needs to be a second gain stage in there. That actually doesn't sound too bad, does it? It sounds pretty messed up. It's breaking up. Now, the problem with this tone is we're trying to replicate the studio tone. He also gets his sound live, but he's using the HM2, and there's only so much we can do with EQ and all that kind of stuff to get that particular sound. You might be able to get even like closer with IRs, or actually never even considered changing the microphone as well to maybe a condenser. Let's see how this goes. That sounds pretty messed up. It definitely is not clean. Now, I'm just wondering how this compares to the live version. You know know what? Have we gone too aggressive here? Was I trying to replicate the EQ effects of the HM2 so much to the point where I was overthinking it in my head? Because I just listened to that live performance tone and it didn't sound as messed up as the recorded version. It sounded a little bit cleaner. You can hear the rodent drive is still getting us to that point where it's breaking up. I might push the tube screamer up. Yeah, so what I did was I just disabled this EQ on here because I think I was trying too hard to emulate that sound, and to the point where I was actually trying to replicate the studio tone. But the approach we should be taking here is the live tone. I know they're using quad cortexes and stuff as well, but they're using captures and whatnot, and we're trying to do this without captures. So let's just do a little low high cut here. It does sound pretty meaty to me still. I think we could probably even, now we've taken the EQ out, we could bump up the rodent drive distortion. That sounds a little bit more like it. Yeah, I feel like this is probably more in the vicinity. Obviously, we don't. If we had a swollen pickle and stuff, it would sound better. But yeah, I'm happy with that. Now, what we need to do is we need to set our stages up here using scenes. We're going to name this first, though. You won't go before you're supposed to. Save that. I'm going to upload this to the cloud at the end and link it in the description as well. But what we're going to do now is we're going to name these. So this is going to be called Hell. We'll call this one, let's see, No Octave. And then this one, we're going to call this one Boosted. Okay. So Hell is this tone here. It's the octave, it's the tube screamer, and it's the rodent drive, which are all assigned. And then No Octave is self-explanatory. That's no octave on there. So okay, no octave. Octave. And then finally for boosted, we're going to turn the octave off and we're going to turn the rodent drive off. It gives us a classic sort of metalcore tone. And we're already at level 10, so I actually think for the boosted tone as well, to get it more of a metalcore type sound, I'm going to put the gain down to 6 because we are boosting it. And then God, that sounds cool. Okay, so I think we've got the tone. So we've got 3 scenes on here. We've got hell, which is kind of like everything is turned on and gained. Then we've got the octave, which is kind of sounds very similar, but no lower note. And then boosted, which is no octave and no additional gain. We also kind of dial it down on the amp as well. So which, I mean, still sounds pretty good to me. Don't get me wrong, that's more of a metalcore-y tone, except we're not scooping out the mids. I might actually put the presence up a little bit just listening to this. Just to kind of bring it forward a little bit more. I'm pretty happy with that. There's obviously only so much we can do in terms of replicating this tone, because it is like if you're doing the studio tone, especially for example, as I said, there's like 10 or 12 tracks in there, which obviously you can't replicate on a quad Cortex. One thing we could have done is, it may be worth, if you're watching this, duplicate this whole entire row and then copy it onto another one. And then kind of have a 2-row setup going, and then, I don't know, add a delay in or whatever. It will kind of get you a little bit more, what's the word? It'll get you a little bit more kind of wideness in there. One thing we could also do is we could add just a reverb in there just to widen things out, like a plate, and then set the mix down to really low, like 15, set the decay to 20, turn the trails off and put the pre-delay down to about 20. And that will kind of widen it a little bit as well. Yeah, I mean, that just kind of gives you a little bit more kind of stereo widening effect when you use a reverb like that. You don't have to, but I generally do. And if we listen to it, it'll be more apparent on the boosted. Yeah, really cool tone. I think that's really all I can do in my sort of, I guess, limited time frame that I give myself to make these tones. Also constraining myself to models only on the device, especially if I'm not even using plugins. A Fort and Nameless may even get you more distortion. But I think for largely, like if you're in a band that's doing this song live and you're in a mix, it's going to sound epic regardless. Like, you could even hear, even on the no octave, it still sounded damn awesome. But getting that chainsaw effect that you get on the HM2, and then obviously the Swollen Pickle boosts and EQ and fuzz that it adds, these are things that you can kind of approximate using little hacks like this and kind of what sounds good and what matches my pickups. But stopping short of using the pedals themselves or captures, which is plenty of captures on the cloud that you can use, this is kind of like a close enough is good enough type thing. And yeah, I try not to spend too long creating these, because I feel like it takes the fun and the magic out if you're spending hours creating this stuff. So if you made it to the end of this video, I thank you very much for watching. If you have any requests for songs or tones you want to see me try and tackle next on the Quad Cortex, leave a comment down below. The one thing I guess with this tone worth pointing out is, as I was saying, it's just an approximation. It's a really difficult tone to get without using captures or proper pedals, but I hope I did it justice. Let me know in the comments what you thought, and I hope to see you around in the next video. See you later.